I think we're recording. You're saying we're recording. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning into the OldSoulz interviews. It's quite early where I am, so I'm getting my mind together before we get started. OldSoulz, for those who don't know, my tagline is how do you know what you know and when did you know it? Last week we started our first roundtable discussion, Mything the New Chapter for Humanity. And if you didn't get a chance to watch it, I strongly encourage you to go back and check out that conversation. We had some pretty dynamic people that was able to contribute to that discussion. As I mentioned, this would be the second round, or we would have a second roundtable discussion with a few other great, fantastic people that will be able to speak more from a global perspective. As you would notice in last week's discussion, everyone was American. So we were primarily speaking from our American experience. Most of the people had global experience, but you just can't substitute for people speaking out of their own regions and their own countries. And so I am not going to attempt to introduce everyone because first my brain is still waking up, and then I would probably just butcher everything about names, introductions from countries, and everything else, man. So they're going to personally introduce themselves. Before we jump into everything, I have asked Adam to take us through a meditation, and then we'll move on from there. All right, Adam, it is turned over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let's sit and relax, close our eyes, have our back straight, and breathe deeply. Breathe into the belly. Let's focus on the breath. Come back to the breath. Every time you're distracted, just come back to the breath. If you want, you can let go of the breath. Just be. Okay. You can come back slowly. Slowly start moving.
Excellent. Man, I'm gonna tell you, man, being still kind of early over here, man. I got in so deep, I was scared I was gonna go to sleep. That was good, man. That was good. Just what I needed. Just what I needed, man, to get everything in alignment. Okay. Well, to the audience, I just had an opportunity to share with the group my mission for wanting to have this kind of conversation. I won't spend a lot of time there just because last week I believe I had a chance to share that during the interview. But what I will add, if I haven't already, is that everyone in this discussion is from a different country. And so that's going to change a bit of our discussion for this week because we get a chance to hear about how the hypercomplexities and how the pressures, if you will, the chaoses across the world, and not just the chaoses, but also the new developments and the new kinds of civilizations and eras that are also emerging in all of this. We'll get a chance to expose and talk about those things, but again, from a more global perspective. I'm going to transition over and just ask each one of these brothers to share about themselves. If you guys, last week what I had each one to do, and I didn't give you guys any prep for this one, but last week I had everyone to think of 3 words to describe themselves and their work, and just a little summary of why you chose those 3 words and how that describes you and your work. And I believe I even added that how that work or those words, relate to your contributions to the planet. So, it's a little heavy to probably think about in like 2 seconds, but I'll give you, just a little bit to think about it, but it'll be fun just to hear what comes out of your mouths, just like in a very short time. So, Peter, I'm going to actually put you on the spot first, man. So, Peter, if you can indulge us in just, whatever comes off the dome, as we would say, if you can share, man, and from there, Menno, and then Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. So my name's Peter Merry. I'm a Brit living in the Netherlands, Chief Innovation Officer at Ubiquity University, and just completed a PhD on evolution and integrative and holographic theory of life.
Congratulations to that too.
Thank you. So if I was to pick 3 words, I think they'd be creativity, disruption, and compassion. Or presence, maybe. And just in terms of this, the phase that we're at as a planet, feels like we're needing to co-create a next phase in our collective journey, and not just a small step, but a significantly disruptive step, disruptive to the old system anyway. So it's got to come from, obviously, creativity. It's got to be significant, and at the same time it's got to come from a place of love and compassion, and not of anger and frustration. So I guess that's the combination.
Beautiful, beautiful, sir. All right, Menno, it's on you.
Hello. I'm Menno. I'm from the Netherlands. What to say? I'm a student at this moment at Ubiquity, one of the university that Peter started as well with Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, what's his name? Sorry.
Garrison.
Garrison. Well, three words that define, I think, spirituality / sustainability, because I think those two are interwoven. Where to me, spirituality is about getting to the next level of ourselves. It's not about just grounding ourselves or diving into a lot of concepts, but it's about saying yes to the process of self-development. Sustainability, because spirituality is a lot about inclusion, about really, becoming part of the whole, including nature, instead of separating ourselves as humanity from nature. And I think leadership, I think that's just really important in this. I think we have a lack of leadership in the places where we need it most. And so that I think those two words combined, maybe consciousness is a better word than spirituality, because spirituality is a word that has a lot of attachments to it. So let's go for those three. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Menno. All right. Last but not least, we have Adam. Share with us, man.
Yes. Hello. I'm Adam. I'm Moroccan, and I live now in Paris. I just finished my studies last year. I did engineering, and I studied also fundamental physics. I'm an entrepreneur also. So I started an NGO in Morocco and other companies in Morocco. And then now I'm just like in a phase where there is nothing. So I'm just open for what comes. So I pick up, I think, these three words, curiosity, vision, and I say consciousness too. And I think I'm just very, very curious to see just to see the world we're living in now and what's emerging in technology and in governance and every field actually that I can read about and see how all of this connecting and is building on some kind of directionality. I think this is why I talked about vision. So I feel it's really, really cool. Well, I'm very passionate to have kind of big visions of where we are headed all together and to connect all the dots and to connect the movements where that inspire actually positive action in the world, and not just have kind of dispatch separate kind of movements and perspectives about where we're going. So yeah, I'm very passionate about that. I feel like consciousness is really central point when coming to this, because it's a matter of realizing who we truly are as just one being having a discussion right now, and one being, one organism animating the planet and moving as one, not dispatched parts. And so I think these three words resume very well what I want to convey.
Nice, excellent. Hopefully, each one of them will be able to speak from their space of work as it relates to planetary work. And again, this interview has been titled "Mything a New Humanity," mything the new chapter for humanity. And so because each of them deal with planetary work, we'll see that the conversation is much more expanded than dealing with humanity, but really dealing with others and just everything involved in terms of cosmos and planet. Last week, I started with the question, where do we come from? And we have a saying here in the States that you can't really know where you're going until you have given due diligence to where you have been. And so I figured to start with the question, just to take it way back and to say, where do we come from? And of course, it's a delve to a question, what's our purpose? And that was pretty fun to hear everyone's response to it. As I share with the guys of the group today, is that there was a humongous, well, let me not say humongous. There was a big age gap. And so, you know, just listening to everyone's contribution to the question, it really made me want to change the question, to be honest with you, because everyone gave such a wealthy response. And at first, you know, I thought, man, they dance around my question, man. Just tell me. But, you know, everything was so well put out there, man. And I really just appreciated what everyone gave out. So I'm not going to change the question, but I'm definitely not going to dictate what your answers should be. So, Peter, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you again. So I just, from your heart space, I want you to share, where do we come from and what's our purpose? What's the human race purpose, man? Where do we come from?
Well, there's a direct answer, which is simply we come from an impulse of life. But then, and that's true however we define the we, whether you define the we as a humanity, whether you define the we as Earth, because ultimately we're the Earth talking to itself right now, or whether you define the we as our particular galaxy, or the we as life as a whole. But either way, in my perspective, it's an impulse that emerged to meet a need in the ecology. You could say a niche or a vacuum in the ecology somewhere. Everything, the way I understand it, emerges due to an impulse to contribute to a general journey towards increased interconnectedness and wholeness, combined with increased differentiation and crystallization of the parts. So that's all I'll say, unless you want to probe in more details. But that's basically, you know, where do we come from and what's our direction? An impulse of life towards greater wholeness and differentiation.
Yeah, that sounds like a very PhD level answer, man. And I appreciate you giving us a lot of traction to work with on there, man. So thank you, man. I love it. Okay, well, it's up for grabs. So either one of you who want to jump in, man, you feel free to do so.
It's just inspiring to hear you, Peter, talking about it like this.
Right. Like, I don't know if I want to go now. Let me really think about it.
I think it's very conceptual. I'll try to make it a little bit more practical. From my perspective, I think, it's what's the chapter of humanity? What we're about? I think it's about experiencing. I mean, I think that the journey of mankind, so to say, is about dissolving the separation with all life around us. So that in a sense we learn in this physical plane through our experiences that we are connected with everything around us. And looking at the global events, the catastrophes, all the developments, geopolitical, I think it's all manifestation of that, of old systems, an old paradigm coming to its end, causing chaos. So we can harvest the lessons from these experiences and reorganize ourselves at a higher level with more clarity, more love, more connection. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
Okay. All right, thank you, Menno. Adam, it's on you, man.
Well, I think my answer is really I don't know. I mean, I can agree with both Peter and Menno, but I feel like I really don't know. Sometimes it's just like, wow, okay, it's like empty space there. but then I think here where comes this impulse, you know, just like impulse to get to know, to engage actually in life. It feels like it doesn't necessarily have kind of justification or why to it. It's more like a spontaneous kind of feeling to just, you know, reach out, show up, and see what's happening. You know, experiencing, I think, as Menno said, or just fully alive, I feel, and looking curiously of why, what's going on here. And then there is love. There is wanting to reach out, wanting to communicate and dialogue as we're doing here, and to see where we're headed, where we're going all together. I feel sometimes it's really cool to have a ground where, yeah, I don't know actually, and then it's just let's place for things to emerge and to have more space for newness and less of the grappling of okay, this is it finally, and then it feels like this is what's happened more and more in last civilizations, where it's like, okay, this is it, you know. We know what's going on, everything, we figured it out, we figured everything, but then it's problematic in itself, where it creates more kind of limitations and bondings, and we want to break free. We want to break free from all of that.
You know, Adam, as I listen to everyone's response, it takes me back to a conversation I had with a friend of mine just yesterday, and just a few things that come to mind is how access to information has really revolutionized the way many people perceive our beginnings. And I say that in particular because when we talk about mythology and when we talk about inclusion of speaking more to the human experience, where people who generally were not included in conversations like this from a global perspective, you have many communities of people who are just not on the map just because they were not discovered, so to speak. But how those new stories, to us they're new, but, you know, to certain communities they have, you know, we think about the Aboriginals and some of the other older civilizations that have their own kinds of beginning stories, and they have their own ways of telling the beginnings. And when you put that in light or in lieu of all the other stories, I mean, there's definitely a wide array of stories, contributions, and the way that we interpret our beginnings. And so anyway, I just thought that everyone being able to tell a very different story I mean, it's a simple but very large question. I think that we all don't, well, at least I can speak for myself, I'm not quite sure. You know, I'm still, you know, grappling with the question and, you know, resituating the question with everyone's experience from across the globe, and hearing the commonalities and also hearing very, very, very different ways to interpret, you know, the beginnings and our purpose. And so I want to transition to the next question of, you know, as we think about the many stories and the many cultures who have their own ways of telling the beginning stories, and their own understandings of what purpose is. You know, we've moving from the past and now to the present. You know, Menno already started opening up some of the things about old systems dying away, and maybe there was some other things that came up in conversation about just where we are presently, but I do want to formally ask the question and put it out there. Where are we now? You can speak from your space, your country aspect. You can speak from a global perspective, whatever that question feels to you, or whatever you feel like you want to respond to that question, however you feel like you want to respond. But I want you all to just respond to that, feel that. Where are we currently?
Shall I start?
Say that once again, Menno.
Shall I start?
Sure. Hey, it's all on you, man.
All right.
Go for it.
Well, the first words that come to me is an era of confrontation. I think that's really where we are. From my perspective, what we see globally is that, again, consciousness is rising because of the more information that is available, the amount of information that we consume on a daily basis, and at the same time, the impact of our old behavior it's getting so large that we're starting to see how we organize ourselves. It's not working. It's not sustainable. It's not going to create a beautiful story for mankind if we look back at this behavior from a future perspective. And I think that's we see it all around us. We see it in politics, for example, in Trump, in the situation with North Korea. We see it in energy. So when it comes to nuclear energy that we're still using, the end of fossil fuels, transition towards new energy systems. Also climate change. That to shortly summarize the confrontation that we have excluded nature in our civilization process here on this planet. I think that's my answer.
Now I can build on that, and I think just to take what Menno just said a step further, in terms of we have excluded nature, if we expand the we from humanity to the earth, so that we don't talk from a perspective of being separate, but we talk from a perspective of being the same. So we, so I'm the earth talking to itself right now. Then I think what process we've been going through is the earth is becoming conscious of ourselves. So through humanity, we have found a way to be able to look back at ourselves as the earth. That's been our experiment as the earth has been to see, hey, can I become aware of myself as the earth? And I think probably one of the most powerful moments for us as the earth when we did that was when we sent part of ourselves outside of the earth, literally to look back at ourselves from space.
Wow.
And when we saw ourselves from space, that's such a big moment, the first time in a way that as a subject of the earth, we were able to see ourselves as an object, which is a really significant moment in our evolution. The challenge with that experiment that we're now facing is, of course, if you want to be able to look back at yourself or become aware of yourself, you have to somehow take some distance from yourself, like we did literally when we sent ourselves out into space. And when we take distance from ourselves, so as humanity, when we become aware of ourselves as separate beings from our mother, in the first years as humans, we actually still believe we're part of our mother. That's how we experience our reality. And then as the ego starts to develop, we become aware of ourselves as separate beings. Now, we as the earth going through a similar process. The tricky point then is when you kind of separate, or you create an awareness that can look back at yourself, whether we're then able to re-embrace our our wholeness as that which we're looking back at, or whether we lose ourselves in the illusion of separateness, whether that distinction becomes separation. And I think that's where we're at now, as in this experiment, as humanity. Humanity is kind of a large part of humanity has forgotten where it came from. You know, they've forgotten that we are the earth, which is a kind of weird thing to forget. But like, well, here we are, right? And anybody looking down at the earth would, of course, see us as the earth, like they'd see any other animal or being on the earth. So the tragedy of that is, of course, that it's allowed us to, destroy our own body because we've seen ourselves as separate, and then we thought, well, we can just take everything that we need from this part of ourselves to feed this part of ourselves. It's like the brain mining the liver. You know, it's insane. Mm-hmm. And yet that's what this. It's what the earth, if you think of it, really, it's what the earth is doing to itself.
Wow.
Right, in this experiment. And of course, this system, the earth as one thing, should this experiment prove a danger to the survival of the organism as a whole, then the experiment would be ended. And that's the way any healthy living system works. So this particular expression of the earth, species of humanity, you know, we're not about saving the earth. If we're interested in saving ourselves and continuing through that process of and Adam has said, of remembering, literally, which means to put the members back together, put the parts back together, remembering who we are, you know, which is the earth. And the moment that one holds a perspective of, well, you know, I'm the earth wandering around experiencing itself, then the questions about, you know, your lifestyle and sustainable lifestyle are just not questions anymore. It's a choiceless choice. You know, why would you do anything other than everything you can do to respect, honor, feed, nurture the body that you're a part of? I mean, anything you do which runs against that. So anything you do that exploits or damages other parts of our being as the earth, you know, would be serious cognitive dissonance, as Freud was saying. And I think that's why we all carry so much stress in our system, because we know somewhere that a lot of the choices we have to make, well, a lot of the choices we do make are actually damaging to ourselves as a whole. And that creates a lot of pain, of course, and then you get into the whole thing about trauma and pain, and then projection of pain and stress and everything else out into the world around us. So I think we're at this point in time where, as an experiment of the earth, it's, well, are we going to make it or not? You know, is the earth going to manage to maintain a level of self-awareness through humanity and go on to survive and thrive? Or are we, as the earth, you know, going to say, oh, well, lesson learned, you know, didn't work out this time, let's end that experiment, and, you know, over however many millions of years, well, maybe another form of the experiment will emerge. And I'm not particularly attached to whichever outcome it is. You know, the earth will be here whether humanity's here or not. The rest of the earth, anyway. The question is, but you know, I think humanity is a beautiful experiment, and we've got really far. You know, and we're at this point, and you can see that there is the possibility for us to wrap back in, as it were, and you can see that consciousness and those practices are emerging. But it's at that breakthrough, breakdown point, really. So all we can do is, for those who are conscious and aware, is put all of our effort into the breakthrough, as it were, the re-embrace, the alignment of everything we think and we do as the earth, and then, you know, release any attachment to survival. But you know, just keep doing whatever it is we can do,
Now,
and we will see.
Now, let me interject just for one moment, because this is definitely a morbid, comical moment, a comic relief, I guess you can say, because taking Peter's transformational leadership course through Ubiquity, there's, which I think everyone on the chat has enrolled in the course and completed. But, you know, you talk about, you know, being committed and unattached and that whole notion, that whole concept, you know, at that time, never was I thinking about the concept of the consciousness of the earth deciding to detach us from the planet, or to essentially get rid of us, man. I'd never had that concept floating in my mind of not being attached to the idea of Earth saying, you know what, you guys were a good idea, but I think it's time to move on to something different.
Well, you know, Rod, it's what the body does when it's functioning healthily. It's called programmed cell death. So any cell in the body that is damaging, that is threatening the health of the body as a whole, when the body is healthy, it will kill the cell. So cancer only emerges. Yeah, cancer only emerges when the programmed cell death function isn't working. So you could see, you know, if you were to extrapolate it out in a way, from one perspective, humanity is having a fairly cancerous effect on the body of the planet as a whole right now. And maybe, you know, in terms of feedback systems, what we're seeing now in terms of ecological disruption and the way that's impacting humanity as a kind of response of the immune system of the earth. That doesn't mean I don't believe humanity's not worth it. I think we are worth it. I think we're earthlings and we belong here. You know, but we need to demonstrate that worth, you know, collectively and at a large scale. If you know, if it's going to be worth the Earth's time, as it were, of you know, us hanging around.
What in that process of cell destruction, programmed cell death, do the other cells get an opportunity to beckon on the other cells' behalf, or do they get a chance to take liberty and destroy the cancer cells before the body disrupts and melts down and have its own kind of, I don't know what that process would be called, but is there any way that as
I understand it, it's fractal and built into the cell itself. So if the cell has dies, basically, it's kind of, you know, built into the natural.
I think
so you could look at it at one perspective and saying, well, humanity is being pretty suicidal right now. You know?
Oh, yeah, you know, and that's, I have heard the suicidal cells, and I think that was more the lens that I was coming from, that we don't take liberties to start killing each other when we recognize that one of us is not contributing to the health and the progress of the system. But that just brings in a very different kind of conversation when you talk about the cell itself committing suicide. Because essentially that's what we're doing. I mean, whether it be intentional or unintentional, is that what we do, what's the old phrase, what you do to others, you're doing unto yourself. But it looks like, Minnow, you want to chime in, and Adam, definitely want to hear from you about some of these things, which I think is a great direction to move into. Minnow, did you want to chime in or segue with something, Peter? Did you resonate with something Peter just said?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I wanted to say that in biology, I think it's called apoptosis. That's the way of programmed cell death. But yeah, I think what I like about Peter is that he calls it, let's say, the Earth experiment. That it's because when you operate from more of an individual level, like as in a human consciousness layer, so to say, it's you don't really see it as an experiment because it might be threatening to the individual, to the sense of identity.
Sure.
And so this is a very interesting process. And now, yeah, I like it a lot.
I don't know how much I like it yet, Peter, man. You're talking about we have no choice in the matter.
No. I'm not saying we don't have a choice. No, absolutely, we have a choice. You know, every single action we take, every single thought we have,
sure,
adds to the the field of humanity and the earth. So absolutely, as a collective, we have a choice.
I do, and I want to circle back around that, Peter, because I mean, I said it quite lightly, but I think that there is many interesting things that can be brought out of in terms of a conversation with free will, choice, and those kind of things, and about the earth. If we are the earth having a conversation with, well, experiencing self, what does that really mean in terms of will and choice? But we can circle back around there here shortly. I want to hear from Adam. Adam, what's your response to the question, what's been shared so far?
Yeah, well, my response was more about the technological emergences we have. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just when you, Peter, were talking about when Earth first created like an entity that went out to see itself, then we finally kind of got the tools to have the possibility actually to increase our consciousness by going out to the space and having this kind of awareness of Earth as an object, and we are aware of the Earth. So it was like shift of identity, where there was a kind of more individuation, and then also with any kind of transcendence, there is always kind of ways where it can go wrong, where we can, like for this example, to go separate and just forget that we are from Earth in the first place, and we are Earth. So yeah, just ironically, Earth now is wanting to create a clone of itself in Mars, while we see like SpaceX programs and Elon Musk talking about having second planets, being multi-planetary species, which is he says it like this: it beats the hell out of being one planetary species. Which is really cool. So yeah, I think what I really want to share is just we're really living in an amazing moment where we have so much kind of directions, where Earth is taking so much experiments towards different directions, and seeing, okay, as if we went wrong somewhere, and then it's like kind of resetting, and then it's launching several kind of experiments to see. It's like a blind person trying to see, okay, where is the direction now? Where are we really heading? So you're gonna see like an amazing kind of burst of creativity in technologies, in political views. Now we're seeing a lot of voices that were unheard before, that were kind of denied. Now it's starting to arise and to take place in the media and in consciousness, and from every field, as if everything is screaming, "I'm here," you know, and yeah, let's discover this kind of path of experiment. So it's really an interesting time to be alive, and to see how we kind of connect actually all these kind of voices that are all screaming to be heard.
Mm.
It just feels like there is no one special kind of voice, where it's more kind of, as you said, Peter, in the beginning, integrating these voices
Mm-hmm.
and having more integral, more broader and yet directional and focused directionality or vision of where we are going together, which is really about connecting the dots.
Wow.
Now we can talk, for example, about technology, where we see, besides space programs, there is VRs, and the potential for VRs to get to raise consciousness is just amazing, because then you're just kind of creating a new world, and you're gonna live there, and you're gonna experience fastly, with less risks, a lot of things, which makes
Adam,
it very possible.
So, and Adam, you're referring to virtual reality, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Virtual reality.
Okay. Continue, please. Okay. Good.
Yeah, and just with experiencing different kind of almost real things, makes more paths, for Earth to experiment for itself of who we are, who am I, and just raise consciousness. It seems to be a lot about raising consciousness. Also, when we talk about AI, it just pushes our limits into understanding what does a human mean, what does intelligence mean, really.
Absolutely.
And what would really be, just last week I saw Blade Runner, the movie, and there was this replicants, which are, by the way, it's really a beautiful movie to see. And these replicants are like high intelligence androids, if I understand well. And it asks, it pushes the limits of humanity as we know. It's like, okay, my God, it's not just like, there is so much going on, and we kind of disrupt all our kind of crystallized beliefs about who we are. And then there is room to move beyond, to be more conscious.
My sense is, Adam, building on what you said, as we as the Earth become aware of ourselves, we then develop agency in relationship to other life around us. So, once we as the Earth can see ourselves, then it's a natural next step to see ourselves as whole, as a part of something bigger. Right? Until that point, we're aware of ourselves as lots of different parts. So an animal is aware of itself as an animal, a plant of itself as a plant, humanity of itself as humanity. But we've never, and the moment that we became aware of connecting ourselves with, so that means we then become a whole, which becomes a new part of something bigger. And so it's no surprise that we as the Earth are now looking to connect to other bodies out there in our own galaxy, as we expand in a way our sense of identity from ourselves as the Earth to ourselves as the galaxy, and start to explore, how do we connect to other bodies that are out there beyond ourselves.
I think the connection between all these themes is the mechanism, so to say, is
no.
on Earth and the opportunities and thus the limitations. So the more we are in this connection, oneness, consciousness, the more our manifestations will look accordingly. That's what I want to say.
Now my internet was interrupted for a few seconds, so I missed a large chunk of what you said, Menno. But the last part of your conversation, just let me make sure that I understood, because you guys are moving into a direction that I was so wanting us to move into even last week. The ideas of consciousness as it relates to technology. And I'm going to say something. I just want you to respond to it. No. Can you hear me? Darn it. Darn it.
He's talking about
there you are.
talking about connection, Rod.
Okay, I'm going to let Adam talk because I'm still going through. Okay, so Adam, you talk, because apparently I'm having some issues, and it seemed like you had something to say. So say what you were going to say. I'm going to hush because apparently the Cosmos don't want me to speak right now. So Adam, you share, then we'll go from there.
No, I think